Alright, so this is what we're making. It's a very simple home page. All it has is a link. It's centered perfectly vertically and horizontally. And notice when you mouse over it, it gives a little shadow. It's using a downloaded font. Alright, no matter how big I make it, it's perfectly centered. You also see there's a linear gradient. Anyway, we're going to do all this. Just pay attention and do what I do. The first thing we're going to do is make our folders. So it's a project. So we're going to go into our projects folder, make a new project. This is project 4. And inside that, we're going to need a fonts folder and an images folder. We're going to have images later on, but not for this step. Alright. And we're going to need a CSS folder. Okay. And then we need a web page and a style sheet. So I'll make that real quick. Alright, so I added a web page called index. That's the home page. And I also created a style sheet, which I'm going to attach. The file, attach style sheet. I named the style sheet home. You're going to need multiple style sheets for this assignment, so name this one home, makes sense. Alright, so we have our style sheet, and for the title I'm just going to put Halloween. Okay. Now the web page itself is really very basically easy. The only thing we're going to add to the body, is a div, and inside that div we're going to have a hyperlink that's going to point to the next page. So href equals, and the next page we're going to do will be, like Halloween movies, so I'm going to call it movies.html. This page doesn't exist yet, so I'm just typing in what it's going to look like. Alright, and then whatever text you want to put in here to get them to go to the next page. I'm using enter if you dare, but you can type whatever else you want. Okay, so if I hit F12, here's what it looks like so far. Alright, so I've moved things around a little bit so you can see my code and the window at the same time. Alright, my style sheet's attached. So I'm just going to flip over to the style sheet because that's what we're going to work with first. I guess the first thing we want to do before we even do that is find a Halloween font. So I'm just going to type in Halloween fonts. And you can use whatever font you like. I think I found one earlier I liked. This one here, Halloween. Download it. Still downloading. Alright, so here's my font file. Just copy that, and I'm going to put it into my fonts folder. Here's my fonts folder. I'll just rename it. You can rename it. I like all lowercase. Halloween. Okay. So I have my font file. And alright, so now what we're going to do is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to style the body. And we're going to give it a background image, like a linear gradient background image. Here's how you give something a linear gradient background image, in case you guys forget. So here's our choices: image, linear gradient, radial gradient, repeating linear gradient, repeating radial gradient, and URL. So we're going to use linear gradient. And then the first thing you can type in is the direction it's going. So I could put, what I'm going to do is I want it to be to bottom, but I could have typed, to right, or to left, or to bottom, bottom, right. That'll be like diagonal. But I'm just going to use it to bottom. And then after that, you could put it as many colors as you like. So I'm going to use this color, which is like a dark red color, and I'm going to use black. Those two colors. But you could add more colors. I'll show you that in a bit. All right. So I save this, hit refresh. This is what it looks like. You see it. It starts dark red and goes all the way to black. But notice it doesn't go all the way to the bottom. It kind of repeats. So what we can do is a little trick to make it go all the way to the bottom. So I'm going to set the minimum height for the body to 100 VH. VH stands for viewport height. This is kind of like 100% of the viewport. The viewport is, whatever the screen you're looking at it on. So if I hit refresh, it looks like this. All the way to the bottom. The only thing that's kind of screwing this up is we have this scroll bar, which we don't need. The reason this shows up is because we have some margin. So it's 100 VH plus, whatever. So I'm just going to set the margin to 0 pixels. And then there we go. Now there's no scroll bar, and the background image linear gradient goes all the way to the bottom. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the font, the downloaded font going. So I'm going to put it at the top, at font face, and then so our source is in the fonts folder. Here it is, and then we name it whatever we want to name it. I'm just going to call it Halloween, and then we're going to use it on the hyperlink here. We're going to style the hyperlink, the A tag. Alright, so I'm just going to use this font family we just made up, and I'll give it a backup. Impact will be our backup, or I could just use Fantasy, I guess. Fantasy will be our backup. Okay, so if I save this and hit refresh, it's not using the font. It's just kind of hard to tell. So let's make that text more readable. So I'll set the color to white, and then I'll get rid of the underline. Text decoration none, and then let's make it bigger. So you can just use whatever font size looks good for you. I'm going to use 80 pixels for now. There we go. So there is our text. Right, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to use flex on this div to center it. So the div doesn't have a class or anything. It's because there's only one div, so no need to do that. If you had a bunch of different divs, you could give it a class. All right, so I'm going to style the div. So we're going to set display to flex, and then to get it centered perfectly, you're going to use two things. Justify content to center and align items to center. That will give you perfect centering. Alright. So it's not perfectly centered, you might notice. It should be like centered down, halfway down. That's because this div, like if I give it a temporary background color, is only this tall. So I have to give it a height. So what height do we give it? I could give it some pixel value, but it's, we want it to be all the way to the bottom. So I'm just going to give it the same min height that we gave the body. It's 100 VH. Alright, so now the div is exactly as tall as the viewport is. I'll get rid of this orange background color. Okay, so it looks like this. The last thing to do is to give it like a shadow when we mouse over it. So I'll just do that here. So a:hover, text shadow. And as you type out text shadow, like 5px, it tells you what these things are. The horizontal is like left or right. And then the vertical is, up and down. And then the next one, blur radius, how blurry it is, and then the color. So I'm just going to use red, just because it'll look good. Since I'm using like a dark red going to a black. So let's refresh it. So here, when I mouse over it, it's pretty nice. And like I was saying, you could use like as many colors as you want. Like if I did comma orange, there it goes from red to black to orange, to whatever. You can have as many colors as you like. But I'm just going to keep it red to black. Actually, it might be good to do like red to black, back to red. That kind of looks neat. But I'll just keep it red to black. You do whatever you think looks good. Whatever, direction, whatever colors. And then anyway, now we're done. Here it is. So this is it. That's all you have to do. Pretty simple.